Today I want to share with you a few cool strategies in online education. So the pandemic hits and it's kind of like an anvil hitting our head. And if you're a math teacher or if you want to do graphs, then what do? Do you have to have a board? I know actually some colleagues who have that. And what about the poor students? I mean, they were already glued to the screen all the time. Now they have to. So basically, everyone in the atmosphere of education is gonna like, oh no, perhaps the only advantage is that you don't have to dress up, right? Anyway, what I found is that in fact, in online education, we don't need to compromise these things. So for instance, pedagogy, not only we don't have to compromise it, but they can actually be gains in the depth of learning of the students. Even the motivation of students, that's a challenge, but there are strategies to accommodate that. Social experience for both teachers and students, that's a challenge, but again, there are some strategies that can help us overcome that. And also academic integrity, which is really a major concern. There are also some cool ways to make it all work out. Now, I don't claim to have a perfect solution to all of this. This is a work in progress, but I'm going to share with you my experience and some tips that I found. For e-learning to work, an essential quality is to have autonomous learners. That's the pivot around which online learning revolves. One aspect of that is the students taking responsibility for their own learning. So this teacher is not spoon feeding them anymore. Another aspect of that is time management skills. So definitely not to procrastinate. That can be very costly in online learning especially. Another aspect is self-evaluation where the students can gauge their own learning. And finally, there is self-motivation where the students feel rewarded. And we as teachers can foster this autonomy in our students through our course design. So as an economist, I'm very sensitive about this idea of incentives, so I always take that into account when I think about how I'm designing my course. In a nutshell, autonomy means the realization that any benefit or loss accrues to oneself. If a student works hard and learns, they get the benefit of it. And if they slack off, then they are going to pay the cost of it. There is a very cool quote by Nietzsche which relates to autonomy. He says, "One repays a teacher badly if one always remains a pupil only." I really love this quote, and this is my slogan in teaching. So I want my students to come out of the course at the end of the term being able to stand on their own feet and explore the world, being competent enough to explore it on their own. So let's see if we can achieve this objective. The most effective e-learning design that I found in my experience is a hybrid model, also known as blended. A little note on terminology here. I'm using blended and hybrid synonymously to refer to any course which has an element of synchronous learning and an element of asynchronous learning. So synchronous means live session with the teacher. This live session could be in person in the class or through a video conferencing platform. So it could be completely remote teaching. Previously, sometimes hybrid or blended were used to indicate a course which has some online element. Nowadays, that doesn't really apply because all courses have some online element. So it's better to use it for synchronous and a mix of synchronous and asynchronous. All right. So the principles that I will cover here will apply to both the model where everything is online, a fully online class, which has some live sessions. And it also applies to classes which have half online and half in person. All right. So let's look at the principles involved. The most important thing is to have a consistent, transparent, and predictable design without any surprises. So there should be a uniform pattern so that the students know what to expect each week, and you also know what to expect in your design, and also they know that what you are expecting from them. Okay, this needs to be done before the term starts, so it needs some preparation. The asynchronous part is that you give the main content in an interactive format, and they're prompted for some input every 3 minutes, roughly speaking. All right. So what it means that is there's some question that pops up. So what I used was H5P tool on Moodle. I won't cover it here because I already have some videos on that on my channel, and the other e-learning fellows have done some good stuff on it, so you can refer to that. But it could also be a reading or a PowerPoint with prompts to stop and answer questions or take notes. You can also use something like Perusal where they annotate reading. All right. And it's important to give them immediate feedback so that they can they can know where they made a mistake and if they need to review, because they don't have access to you live. Something that I found useful is to give them unlimited attempts without any penalty. It's also important to have a submission for the synchronous class. So this is about incentives. So you make them accountable. So there should be some form of submission after they review the content. So to make sure that they watched the video, they did the reading. And also feel rewarded for it, right? So when we meet in class, we pick up from that submission. It could be a reflective writing, for instance, as I tried it. What I did also, this was the highlight of my experience, to have individual meetings on the asynchronous days. So whenever they were watching the video, I scheduled them to drop in one at a time and give each student at least 10 minutes of undivided attention. That really boosted their experience and also mine. It built a strong bond between us. I got to know them and appreciate them as a person. I got to know their hobbies, their background, their struggles, and I helped to troubleshoot their problems. So that really helped. So that gives a sense of care and also boosts the motivation of these students. Now you're looking at this and you're like, hang on, how come your avatar is schizophrenic, half French, half English? Yeah, I mean, he's going through an identity crisis. He's lost in the clouds. Anyway, when we talk about the consistency and transparency, some useful tool is the Moodle checklist or using a course flow. That really helps reduce the procrastination. It clearly indicates to the students if they have missed anything. So that was also a success in my experience. The synchronous part of blended model is for reviewing, practicing, and troubleshooting, not for content, not for lecture. So there are going to be activities where the students must feel engaged and challenged. It's not really about the size of the group. The important thing is that they feel engaged and they are challenged to raise their learning to a higher level with an equal weight to avoid free writing and to apply and produce. So this is the nature of the activities. They have already covered the basic levels of learning. So we're not going to aim at activities at the basic level like defining and remembering. Instead, I would like to aim at debating, comparing, and evaluating. So that's the nature of the activities. In this regard, I found case studies and examples to be very useful. So you can use breakout rooms as we did in online learning. And in the breakout rooms, there are certain rules and principles to follow. So one of them is super important to have clear instructions and roles. Now here, this doesn't mean role playing or you know, someone being the devil's advocate or whatever. What it means is that each group member would know what they have to do and is able to get actively engaged even if their team members do not. So that's the idea of avoiding free writing. There is a shared document. So I use OneDrive. You can also use Google G Suite, where they work together on a document, and it's text. Everybody has access to it, and they submit it. So there's an artifact to submit. You monitor their work without stepping in. This is possible if you have the shared document. So for instance, if you have G Slides, Google Slides, you can see the progress. Also in OneDrive, if there's a Word document, you can look at their progress as they're working. All right. Also, there is no judgment or evaluation. So they are still in their learning process. It can be a great deterrent if they feel like they are being judged or watched all the time. So let their imagination go wild. You will have the time to review as a class when you get back together. So you have breakout rooms for, let's say, 30 minutes roughly, half of the class at most. So let them have participation marks for completion. So that also makes them feel rewarded. And then review after they are done. So you come back to the main session and you review the common mistakes and also good examples. So not only the weaknesses but also the strength, and that also makes them feel rewarded. So you praise them for that. So nobody is being picked out specifically for any mistakes. You're just going through common mistakes. All right. Another thing that's super useful is this idea of a group chat. So students you are pretty good in creating a group chat, let's say on Instagram. This is super useful for them. Some teachers don't like it, but come on. If you feel like they're talking behind you, well, they always talk behind you, but they need to have this connection. They need to have this community. So that can actually help them a lot in terms of not procrastinating and clarifying and helping out each other. So that's something to be valued. How about academic integrity? One thing that I noticed was a certain dichotomy between focusing on cheating versus learning. As an economist, we always deal with constraints and limitation, so there is no escape from sacrifice, and we must prioritize. So which one would you place at the center of your design, academic integrity or student learning? So the primary purpose of examination is to measure student learning. This is not about putting down academic integrity. It's just about a shift of focus. So it changes the dynamic of the game. We are no longer a police who is there to catch robbers, but we are coaches who want to train our athletes to be strong enough that they wouldn't need to take steroids. All right, so that's kind of like a paradigm shift. Now, the way I did this was, first of all, I allowed them to have memory aid, and I had this even before the pandemic. The memory aid is a very useful studying tool. Instead of having all of their notes during the test, they get to have one sheet of paper which they have to create specifically for the test. So they actually have to study for it. It reduces the incentive to cheat because they don't feel like there's a prohibition. They already have a cheat sheet. And I can expect their commitment. So because I'm letting, it's kind of like a compromise. I let them have a cheat sheet, and then I expect them to not use any other resource. So you have a checklist where they make that commitment. By the way, we already built a trusting relationship. The test comes in after 5 weeks of lecture. We've already built in a bond with each other. I've already met with them through the individual meetings. And they already have seen that the teacher allows them unlimited attempts in the activities, and that the overall course design shows them that there is that compassion that the teacher wants them to learn. So that also really matters and helps a lot. They also know the level of learning that's being aimed at, that you're looking at applications and not merely definitions. So that also helps reduce the cheating. So basically, instead of focusing on cheating, we focus on raising the level of learning. And by raising the level of learning, cheating also becomes inapplicable. Okay, so you actually get to kill two birds with one stone. There's a review session where we go through the practice test questions. So I tell them that these are previous test questions. They have access to them, and we work on them as a class. And the questions are based on transfer of learning. So transfer is a specific term in education, and you can look at it at 3 levels. So first of all, there's the transfer from prior knowledge to learning, and that happens in the asynchronous stage. Second is from learning to new learning, and that happens through both the asynchronous and the synchronous content. And then at last you get learning from going from learning to application, and that happens from at the synchronous and also the exam. All right, so that I'm going to look at some examples after this video. Here's a question I wrote for their test. Can the inflation rate be negative? If so, in what case? This is basically just about understanding the inflation formula. Then I thought, you know what, let me put this into Google and see if they can cheat. And when I put it in Google, the result was you have a perfect answer right on the top of the page, and it's even qualified, so it's even nuanced. And also, so basically they don't even have to click on anything, and there's even more stuff on the bottom. So, and all of this was found in less than 1 second, right? So all they had to do is just copy paste the question into Google. So when I saw that, I was literally shattered. I was like, oh, Google, come on, we used to be friends. I wasn't expecting this from you. So what I did was that I started thinking about how I can remedy this. And the breakthrough came in the most opportune moment under the shower. Why do I have glasses over there? Anyway, and all major human discoveries, as you know, were made in the bathroom, right? So here's how I updated the same question. Look at the difference. Consider the following story missing from Lewis Carroll's novel. When Alice went to Wonderland, she wanted to buy a cup of tea from the hare, and whatever. The hare got 1 joker card from Alice and gave her a cup of tea. The following year, Alice decided to visit Wonderland once again. By now, she was a professional tea addict, so she felt like having 2 cups this time. She took 2 joker cards with herself and gave it to the hare, demanding 2 cups. The hare gave her 2 cups of tea, but also returned 1 joker card. At that point, Alice was like, what the... anyway, help remove Alice's confusion using what you've learned in the course. Use economic concepts. Now, look at the difference. This is exactly the same competency. It's about the inflation formula, and it's a negative inflation rate. Notice that there is absolutely no economic term here. I didn't use price, I didn't use inflation, I didn't use currency, and I'm using joker cards as the currency involved. All right, so that really helps. This doesn't show up in Google. Now, how about cheating among students? So they can look it up online. What about cheating among students? To remedy that, I came up with multiple versions of the same question. So another version of the same question for this one was, consider the following story missing from Shakespeare's The Tempest. Caliban always remembered his mom, Sycorax, through a comb which he gave her. I bought this for you from the witches for 2 acorns. The comb came in handy as Caliban was enslaved by Prospero. 20 years after he was freed, he visited the witchland and decided to buy another comb. He took with himself 2 acorns so that he can buy a comb like the one he had. What does this tell you about Caliban's impression of witchland? Now, this is really the same formula. The difference is that in the last question, the inflation rate was negative. Here, the inflation rate is 0. And the students it would be really impossible for students to cheat on this, whether online or among themselves. Right now, you might actually, this is one of the students later told me that when they saw the Shakespeare, they thought they were in the wrong course. Wasn't it supposed to be economics or English? Anyway, so it takes a little bit of creativity. I came up with other similar questions using The Little Prince, Peter Pan, Star Wars, Harry Potter, you name it. So basically, the result was that I won. It's still possible to defeat AI, and in all other questions, the same happened. So the evidence that they didn't cheat was that my class average in the tests was between 45 and 55. Now, I know that's not something to be proud of, but at least it shows that they didn't cheat. At least they didn't succeed in cheating, right? So it's still possible to beat Google. Now, you're watching this and you might be like, hang on, you teach this cool subject where you can come up with these applications. But that's not true. These questions simply don't exist. I really had to think and create them. And you can do it too, regardless of your discipline. Let me share with you some data, and this is from 7 sections of Introduction to Economics over 4 years. So in each of the comparisons, there were at least 80 students, but the total number of students was more than 200. When I chose to have multiple attempts with immediate feedback and no penalty, especially when I implemented the no penalty, so when I removed the penalty of retrying the questions, what happened was that on average, there was about 7 minutes that the students spend more on each activity. These are Moodle activities. That would be about 35 to 70% of the time on the activity. And they spend about 7 minutes less on the exams. Now notice that this is exactly the kind of thing we want to see. We want them to spend more time during their learning stage and therefore be more competent when it comes to their showtime in the test. All right. The exam grades were also higher, but less consistently and not as significant. So it kind of during the beginning of the course it was more significant. Another question that I gave them was that I asked them about the effectiveness of the design in learning, in online learning, and they had the option of synchronous, asynchronous, and blended. And the 2 options of asynchronous and blended were significantly more favored by students. They upvoted that in terms of their learning. Now, this was in May, where the synchronous models hadn't developed as much, but also the asynchronous and blended weren't as developed much. So it might have changed by now. Another disclaimer here is that this also depends on the discipline. So for instance, in language or performance courses, they may require more synchronous or even in-person instruction. Thanks a lot for watching, and many thanks to friends and colleagues who helped me along the way on my journey.